You can't feel your hands anymore. The silk bandages wrapped around them are soaked through blood or pus. You can't tell. The silver mask covering your face traps the desert heat, making every breath feel like inhaling fire. You're 16 years old, strapped to a saddle because your legs no longer work. And you're about to charge 26,000 men with 500. The ground shakes under their hooves. You can smell it, horse sweat mixed with metal, leather, fear. Your knights are weeping. They think this is suicide. But then you raise your bandaged hand and everything changes. Drop a comment from wherever you are. I'm still amazed this story reaches from Seoul to Stockholm. Let me tell you what happened next. November 25, 1177. Somewhere between Jerusalem and the Mediterranean coast, a dying teenager is about to rewrite every rule of medieval warfare. The place is called Montgisard. You've never heard of it. Neither had most of the world until sunset that day, when it became soaked in enough blood to fill a river. The era is the Crusades, but forget everything you think you know. This isn't about religion. This is about one sick boy standing between survival and annihilation. Here's what makes this unbelievable. The boy leading this charge shouldn't be alive. His diseased leprosy should have killed him years ago, yet somehow he convinced 500 knights to follow him. But what happened next broke every rule they thought they knew. Before dawn, someone would make a choice that doomed thousands. A golden mace would fall from trembling fingers. And the last person standing would be the one nobody expected. Baldwin IV was crowned at 13. By 16, he was dying in installments. Leprosy doesn't kill quickly. It kills thoroughly. First, the nerves die, so you can't feel pain, which sounds like mercy until you realize pain is what keeps you alive. The silver mask wasn't ceremonial. It was necessary. His face had collapsed inward. The cartilage dissolved, the skin pulled tight over bone. His advisors begged him to abdicate. His doctors said he had months, maybe weeks. His nobles made secret plans to flee Jerusalem. Baldwin refused to die on schedule. Saladin wasn't just a general. He was a phenomenon, a military genius wrapped in genuine piety, who united Egypt and Syria through brilliance rather than terror. At 40 years old, he commanded an empire stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates. His army numbered over 100,000 warriors. He'd won every battle he'd fought, every single one. In November 1177, he assembled 26,000 of Islam's finest Mamluk cavalry trained from childhood to be living weapons. The mathematics were simple. Jerusalem was doomed. This is where the story should end. Where Baldwin waits behind walls for the inevitable siege. Where history records another crusader defeat. But Baldwin did something that made his own knights question his sanity. On November 23rd, he ordered a forced march not to safety, but toward Saladin's army. 45 miles in 36 hours. A pace that would kill healthy men, let alone a decomposing king. When Baldwin lost consciousness from Penant, he did. Repeatedly, Templars carried his litter. When he woke screaming, they gave him wine mixed with poppy tears and kept marching. His commanders demanded an explanation. Baldwin's answer was 3 words. God requires service. Saladin made one fatal mistake. He got comfortable. His 26,000 warriors spread across 3 miles of countryside, foraging, resting, celebrating victories that hadn't happened yet. His elite Mamluks gambled with dice, weapons stacked carelessly. Why worry? Jerusalem was defenseless. The Crusader states were fractured, dying. The smart money said the kingdom had days left. November 25th dawned clear and hot. Unusual for late autumn. The kind of weather that makes armor cook your skin. By dawn, Baldwin's impossible march had covered ground that shouldn't have been possible. His scouts brought news that made hardened warriors go pale. Saladin's army was spread out, vulnerable, completely unprepared. Here's what you need to understand about the Templars, the warrior monks who formed Baldwin's core force. They'd taken vows, not just to fight, but to never retreat. never surrender, never show mercy. They were fanatics by design, men who believed death in battle guaranteed paradise. 80 Templars rode with Baldwin that day. 80 men trained for one thing: to kill or die for Jerusalem. But here's the twisted irony that makes this story haunt you. The Templars' Grand Master, Odo of St. Amand, has been captured by Saladin months earlier. Tortured, released, he knew exactly what awaited them if they lost. The man leading Baldwin's charge had experienced Saladin's mercy firsthand. He still had the scars. He still had the nightmares. He did it anyway. At 11 a.m., Saladin received his first warning. Dust clouds to the north, moving fast. His initial reaction was laughter. The reports made no sense. Baldwin wouldn't dare leave Jerusalem's walls. It had to be a scouting party. By noon, the truth became undeniable. Crusader banners appeared on the ridgeline, the blood-red cross of the Templars, 500 lances catching the sun like a forest of steel. Saladin's scattered forces began frantically trying to reform. But 3 miles is a long distance when your enemy is charging at full gallop. And then Baldwin raised his bandaged hand. The signal his knights had been praying for. 500 lances dropped to charging position, the sound like thunder rolling across the plain. But Saladin had missed something crucial. Something that would doom his army. 2 p.m. struck like the hammer of God himself, the Templar. Wedgie knights formed into a human spears, mashed into Saladin's half-formed center at full gallop. The sound was like mountains colliding. In the first 10 seconds, 300 Mamluks simply ceased to exist. Not died, ceased to exist. Crushed under hooves. Transfixed by 12-foot lances. Trampled into the earth until they were part of the landscape. But here's what defies explanation, what keeps military historians arguing centuries later. The Templar horses were exhausted. They'd marched 45 miles. They should have been stumbling, dying, collapsing under their armored riders. Instead, they fought like creatures possessed. War horses bit and kicked, adding to the carnage. One Templar horse, its rider dead and hanging from the saddle, continued charging through Muslim ranks for a full minute. And Baldwin, strapped to his saddle, bleeding from reopened wounds, led from the front. His diseased hands shouldn't have been able to grip his sword. Every chronicle, Christian and Muslim alike, records the impossibility. The leper king held his sword high, shouting encouragement. At 2:15 p.m., something happened that broke military logic. Saladin's center 8,000 of Islam's finest cavalry began to buckle. Not retreat, buckle, like a dam cracking under impossible pressure. Muslim commanders couldn't process what they were seeing. How could 500 exhausted knights be pushing back 16 times their number? Then Baldwin's infantry appeared. 3,000 men, hidden in dead ground, suddenly materialized on the Muslim flank. 2 Saladin's already rattled forces. It seemed Crusader armies were appearing from nowhere. Shouts of, "We're surrounded," spread like wildfire through Muslim ranks. Mathematically, nonsense. Psychologically devastating. The impossible was happening. 26,000 warriors were being routed by a force they outnumbered 52 to 1. At 2:45 p.m., battle became massacre. Muslim forces tried to flee. That's when they discovered Baldwin's tactical genius. Those ravines' natural features, invisible from distance, became death traps. Knights pursued fleeing Muslims straight into these killing grounds. The chronicles describe horrors that still echo. Men trampling each other, horses screaming, warriors throwing away everything to run faster. The ravines filled with bodies, literally filled. 20 feet deep in places. Muslims fell in layers, the dead cushioning the dying. Some ravines created bridges of flesh. Others tried to cross. At 3 p.m., the unthinkable happened. Saladin's personal guard, 2,000 Mamluks, who'd sworn to die before abandoning their sultan, broke. These were men who'd faced Mongol cavalry without flinching. Yet, faced with Templars who fought like men, seeing paradise opening before them, they ran. Saladin himself watched his invincible army disintegrate. He made a decision that would haunt him forever. He abandoned his horse to slow for escape and mounted a racing camel, a pack animal. The Sultan of Egypt and Syria fled on a pack animal. The sight shattered the last Muslim resistance. The killing didn't stop at sunset. It went on for hours. Crusader knights, their blood up, chased fleeing Muslims for miles. The killing was mechanical, efficient, horrible. Lances broken, they used swords. Swords blunted, they used maces. The ground became slippery with blood. Horses slipped and fell. Men drowned in mud made from dust and gore. Modern historians still can't explain this part. How did 500 exhausted knights maintain pursuit for 2 hours? How did horses near death find strength to run down fresh Muslim cavalry? Christian chroniclers had an answer. God's strength flowed through them. Muslim chroniclers, horrified, agreed. This was divine punishment. By 4 p.m., the impossible statistics emerged. Of 26,000 warriors who woke that morning confident in conquest, fewer than 2,000 would see sunset. The Crusaders lost 100 dead, 24,000 dead or captured. In 3 hours, it wasn't a defeat. It was annihilation. The setting sun illuminated a vision from Revelation itself. Bodies lay so thick that Crusader horses picked their way carefully, like walking on carpet. The ravines had become mass graves, filled to overflowing. Baldwin, finally allowing himself to be lifted from his horse, collapsed immediately. Knights rushed to support their dying king, but he waved them away. There on that field of 20,000 corpses, the leper king led his exhausted army in prayer. Non nobis, Domini, they chanted. Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory. The sight of 500 blood-soaked killers kneeling in prayer while surrounded by bodies struck even hardened warriors as surreal. Saladin's humiliation was complete. The man who'd never known defeat arrived in Cairo with fewer than 2,000 survivors. His racing camel had saved his life but destroyed his reputation. Warriors who flee on pack animals don't inspire loyalty. The Muslim chronicler Ibn al-Athiyah called it the most terrible catastrophe to befall Islam in this age. Jerusalem erupted in celebration. Church bells rang for 3 days straight. But in the royal chamber, Baldwin IV lay dying. The battle's physical toll on his ravaged body was catastrophic. Physicians warned he might not survive the night. Yet somehow, impossibly, the leper king endured. When asked how he'd found strength to fight, Baldwin whispered, "Pain means nothing when God requires service." For 10 years after that bloody November day, Saladin approached the Crusader states with newfound caution. The man who'd swept all before him had learned that numbers alone don't guarantee victory. Baldwin IV continued his impossible reign for 8 more years, each one a medical miracle. The boy who shouldn't have lived commanded respect from enemies who outnumbered him 50-1. By the end, he was blind, couldn't walk. His body had literally fallen apart piece by piece. His mind remained sharp, his courage unbroken. When he finally died in 1185 at age 24, Saladin himself reportedly said, "I feared that man more than any army." A single letter survived from that day. Written by a Templar knight to his brother in France, discovered in monastery archives in 1342. One line changed everything historians thought they knew. "We should have died that day. We were dead men riding." But when the king raised his hand, something happened. Even the horses felt it. We became something else, something terrible and holy. The letter is stained. Tests confirmed its blood. Whether the writers or his enemies, we'll never know. You're back where we started. The silver mask. the bandaged hands. The impossible odds. But now you know why. Now you understand that sometimes courage isn't about feeling no fear. The battlefield at Montgisard is still there, a quiet plain between Jerusalem and the coast. Archaeologists occasionally find artifacts buried 3 feet deep. And if you visit on November 25th, locals will tell you something strange. The ground still feels different there, heavier. Baldwin saved the Crusader states that day, but he couldn't save himself. His victory bought 10 years of survival for a kingdom doomed by demographics. Just 2 years after Baldwin's death, Saladin reconquered Jerusalem. Without the leper king's leadership, the Crusader states crumbled like sandcastles before the tide. But here's the question historians still argue about. Did those 24,000 men die because of superior tactics, divine intervention, psychological warfare? Or did they die because 500 men believed the impossible was inevitable, and belief, sometimes, is the most powerful weapon of all? One final detail the chronicles recorded: when Baldwin's body was finally laid to rest in 1185, they removed his silver mask for burial. The priests who prepared him wept, not from horror at his appearance, but because underneath the ravaged flesh, his expression was peaceful. He died smiling.